Welcome to this new Flight Simulator update movie. It's there. For those who didn't participate in the beta of the Aircraft and Avionics update number 1, you can now download it because it has been officially released. One thing which they always recommend you to do is make sure that you remove the content from the community folder. And as this update contains, I would say, a huge update for both the CJ4 and the G3000, it's definitely recommended to move both the working title mods from the community folder because else they will conflict, right? So keep that in mind, remove them because this is the official release and this is the official version you should use from now on. So let's have a look what's being fixed. Well, first of all, they fixed the unflyable helicopters when you had the flight model set to legacy. And this has now been adjusted and fixed, so that's really cool. They also made some fixes for the controls for loss of pitch axis on the helicopters. Again, a helicopter fix. And they repaired the snow covering 100% of the airport tarmac and roads, right? You might have seen it in the previous release where when there was snow, for example, if you fly in the Nordics, there was only snow and you couldn't see the tarmac and the roads, so it's crazy hard to navigate on the airport itself. Then there was a fix for the nav data. They fixed the delete nav at airport, and that was removing the VOR, NDB and waypoints every time. So it removed, I would say, your flight plan in worst cases. And they fixed the secondary aerials, sometimes overridden by the Bing aerial on terrain with photogrammetry, right? Photogrammetry content, again, is to, let's say, optimize the content and to make the content even nicer, right? There are a lot of photogrammetry content packages released as part of those world updates, mainly for cities. And talking about that, keep an eye on the, I would say, Flight Simulator site, because tomorrow there's a new developer update. And that Twitch stream will also contain what will happen in the latest or the newest world update, which has been released a while ago. Latest fix in the general bug fix section is the fix the terrain level of detail issue on the Xbox, right? So if you're playing it on the Xbox, then you should also be good. Then going to the aviation and aircraft updates, right? In this case, it's an aviation system. It's the Garmin GNS 430W and the 530W. They have received an upgrade which make them more accurate to, I would say, to the real world life, to the real world navigation systems, right? So what did they do? They added the comprehensive visual overhaul for the aircraft font, symbology, look, operation, and feel. So simply change the visuals, right? So it looks more cool. They introduced advanced flight planning, which is really cool. Look at my channel because I post some videos about that. Because there are several things like holds, which you now can configure using a flight plan, which is one of those complex procedures. But as you can see, there's also now support for departure, arrival, and approach procedures, right? It's also known for the arcs, the holds, and the procedure turns, which was not possible in the earlier release. And there's also the correct real unit limitations, no radius to fix, heading, or some intercept lags. Then the other cool thing, if you love to fly using AirNav, right, which is one of the options to use. For example, there are also some other options like what's it called? I think these are mostly used for approaches, right? You've got the ILS approach or the VR approach. There's also the AirNav approach. And this one now supports for LPV, LP, LNAV, VNAV, and the plus V vertical guidance during approaches. And that's where I would say is mentioned, right? It's only for approaches, but it will now keep an eye on the, I would say, glide path, right? So you're making sure that you're, I'd say, on the correct altitude, and that's now being added to the system. Then a GPS satellite and SBAS simulation, including orbital mechanics-based real satellite position and accurate SBAS coverage areas and GPS status page. So this specific system now has a GPS page, which now shows you the actual status about the satellites and the SBAS, right? So that's really cool, and it makes it even more realistic. And that's one of the, say, things which they wanted to achieve, right, using this update. Then there's the VNAV profile calculator page and associated reminders and alerts. That's if you love flying VNAV, then this is really you something you should look at. And there's support for the missed approaches and missed approach holds, right? So missed approaches, normally when you schedule a flight or you schedule approach, there's the missed approach, right? If you missed it for some reason, for example, there's another aircraft on runway or you simply missed it, then in this case, what you will see is that there is also a missed approach, which is directly planned after the landing. So in case you miss the approach, you can directly skip to the missed approach and then follow the missed approach procedure. There's a full specification aircraft ADS-B basic traffic avoidance system, right? So traffic avoidance system, simply to prevent that you're hitting other aircrafts. Really cool to see because I already played with it. And there's the more accurate map symbology procedure previews. So you can now preview a procedure before, I'd say, actually activating it, which makes flight planning during the flight easier. Next one is the keyboard entry for waypoints, nav aids, and direct tos, right? So in the past, or I would say prior to this update, you needed to use that your mouse to click on it, or if you played on the Xbox, you should use your Xbox controller. Now you can simply go to the keyboard entry mode and then use the keyboard to specify those nav aids, which makes it a lot easier. Numerous customization options found on the real unit, such as the metric imperial unit settings, the map data field settings. So you can now customize this flight system, both the GNS 430 and 530W. And the last one is the satellite weather overlay support based on the NextRad, which is, I would say, really cool. Where can you find this, these systems or these systems? Well, you can find them in these aircrafts, right? So the first four are the default aircrafts. Depending on, of course, which version of Flight Simulator you bought. The C172, the Cap 10, the DA40 TDI, and the DV20. And the bottom three, those are, I would say, separate add-ons which you need to buy, right? So they're not, I would say, default, but you need to buy them in addition to the packages which you might have already bought, right? Then there's the Cessna Citation CJ4 and Avionics. So this one received both an avionics update, but also the aircraft received an update where they fixed some of the issues. Again, the visual overhaul, like the fonts, symbology, they all changed it. Really cool. There's now an independent MFD and FMS operation, so they're now independent from each other. And there's also the advanced flight plan support. So you can see kind of similarities, sorry, hard word, between the GNS and this one. And that makes sense, right? Because I would say in some cases they try to, I would say, align all those aircrafts having the same functionality. In this case, also the arcs, the radius to fix, the intercepts, holds, procedure turns, misapproaches, etc., which are now possible to enter in the flight plan. Then you've got the coupled VNAV with editable constraints, flight path angles, vertical path smoothing, and VNAV invalidation conditions. This for those who really love to fly VNAV. This allows you to, I would say, more accurately use the system. To be honest, I didn't try VNAV that much yet. Still something to do on my list. So keep an eye on my channel because I will probably post a video about it shortly. Then the advanced autopilot, right? It now includes armable lateral and vertical modes, as well as the complex combined arm modes. So in some cases, you might want to combine certain modes. That was not possible prior to this update, but it's now possible. So it allows you to use, I would say, the more advanced functionalities of the autopilot. Then looking from the aircraft itself, they made a change to the cabin pressurization and complete crew alerting system, right? So to alert the crew. The FMS performance calculations for takeoff and landing speeds. So you now have the option to calculate, okay, hey, what are the takeoff and landing speeds? And based on that, you can set those, let's say, markers on the display, which will help you, let's say, indicating, okay, am I going too fast or am I going too slow? The integrated dual engine FedEx system with N1 mode indications and accurate N1 targets. Another display system which they optimize, and also the independent display options and state saving, right? So you can now change the displays independent. So you can change the left one and then keep the co-pilot one at default. And the good thing is that those states are saved, right? So it will remind itself. And then when you continue, it will make sure that they are in the same state as you left. Then there's the enhanced FMS text MFD display modes. There are now some modes which you can switch, and the enhanced FMS text, which will show you some more information, some different information Really cool. And there's also the keyboard entry mode for the FMS data entry, right? To plan your flight, you can now simply push the keys on your keyboard to enter that navigation beacon. Next thing is the AHRS alignment and startup sequence, right? That one was already part of the working title version, where if you start the aircraft, it would take some time before it was aligned and the alignment was completed. And now the startup process of this aircraft is more realistic, really cool. Last two items, right? They improve the flight model. Several, I would say, things like the fuel consumption, the handling while on ground effect, and also they improve the engine and interior sound effects. So really cool to see. The next update is again for, I would say, a flight system, right? So the avionics, the Garmin G3000 and Garmin G5000 avionics suites. Here again, you can see the same things, right? You can see the comprehensive visual overhaul. You can see the advanced flight planning. The other thing which they added in this one, which isn't part of the other ones, is the support for custom waypoints, right? Including latitude and longitude, point bearing distance, and a present position. And again, VNAV, right? In this case, they've got two VNAV modes. One is the simple VNAV. It's the descent path VNAV only. Always target bottommost altitude constraint. And there's the advanced VNAV. It's a climb constraint and descent path VNAV. So vertical path smoothing through varied constraint types, editable constraints, and flight plot angles. So this one, I would say, is more for those who are more familiar with VNAV, while the other one is, I would say, kind of the simple version, right? That's why they probably also call it simple. Then they have independent PFD and GTC options. So previously they were bound to each other, but they now disconnected them. So they now you can now manipulate the PFD and GTC independent. And there's the PFDs and MFDs will now have full split pane support. So you can split the page into two pieces if you want. That was previously not possible, but now you can do it. Again, support for the full set of context-dependent GTC knob controls, so the knobs are now working good. And there's also the GPS satellite and SBS simulation like we saw earlier with the GNS 430 and 530. That's now being simulated, so you can now have a separate GPS status page where you can see the status of the GPS. That's the same thing for the next one, which is the traffic avoidance system, right? They will call it the spec-compliant Garmin TIS, TAS, and TCAS number 2. So it, I would say, is a more advanced system compared to those from the GNS 430 and 530. But the simple reason is that you simply want to avoid any, I would say, accidents, and that's where you've got the system for. Then they added multiple layout styles, including horizontal or vertical GTCs, screen options, number of screens, and more, right? So when you play around with the options, I would say once you install this update, you can see that you've got multiple options where you can, for example, split the screen where you can see on the bottom, you can see the engine, or you can say, hey, I want to see on the bottom of that center screen, I want to see the flight plan, etc. So there's some more options now which were not previously part of this would say system, but there now are, which I would say makes it easier to customize your things and make it, I would say, a little bit more customizable for you, so you can set your preferred layout and use the aircraft or the system the way you want to use it. And then there's also the support for custom V speed box, the SVT angle of attack indicator, the HSI moving maps, timers, minimums and the bearing pointers, a lot of things right you now can customize and simply show, hide, or show it a different way in using this system, right? Using the Garmin G3000 and G5000. Almost there, the multitude of customization options, right? Including the metrics, all saved per screen and or aircraft, right? So you can simply set those measures. For example, if you want to have, say, one measure unit in, for example, aircraft number A, you can set a different one in aircraft number B if you want. And also here, there's the AHRS alignment and startup sequence, which they changed. This one has some additional things like the JavaScript plugin support for loading several things like the engine, instrument, and the systems, also known as IS displays, the custom PFD and MFD display panes, half or full screen, and the custom GTC navigation icons and pages. Last thing is also that they changed or added as a JavaScript plugin is the aircraft systems, simulation, and instrument styling. Now going to the aircraft. or aircrafts, right? Because there's more. The first one is the TBM 930. That one is using the G3000, right, which received an update. It contains support and wiring for this new system, as well as support for fully coupled basic VNAV as found in the real aircraft. Initially, this wasn't part of the aircraft. Maybe it was using a third-party add-on, but now it's native in the aircraft. Also, they customize a highly accurate IS system, as well as the system synoptic pages, which are more accurate, as well as customize the electrical modeling. Hard word, right? For late evening. Last item they did is a support for opening exterior cockpit and cabin doors, so you can now really open and close the doors like we saw with other third-party add-ons where you could open and close the doors. The next aircraft, the Cessna Citation Longitude, that one is using the Garmin G5000, right, which we just discussed. So based on the systems which are now supported by that new Garmin system, or updated Garmin system is actually better wording, it has some more options like the advanced VNAV mode, which we saw also with the one of the other aircrafts, right? I think it was the Cessna CJ4. Also, they made changes to the flight model, right? Better feeling and direct control, highly accurate performance numbers, revised fuel burns, and improved the ground and crosswind handling, as well as the more accurate float during the landing phase. Again, here also the dual engine FADEC, right? So you can see that they made some changes to the CG4, which they also applied here. Maybe they reused something, I'm not sure. And they also implemented the fully featured out-of-roll system with correct AT modes, functionality, and communication to and from the FMS, right? So you have a small button next to the throttle where you can activate the auto throttle mode, but they enhanced it. Really cool to see. Then they customized the system synoptics pages as well as the IS page where they made some modifications, and there's now a full suite of accurate CAS messages, right? And those CAS messages are warning you if something is wrong, if you forgot something to do, if there's something wrong with your aircraft, it will tell you to do. Then the takeoff and landing data, TOLD support for FMS takeoff and landing performance calculations, right? So you can calculate, okay, what's the idle speed to take off and to land, that's not being included, as well as the modeled systems based on manufacturer feedback and documentation. So it's really cool because it looks like in this case, Cessna, I would say, informed Asobo and Microsoft they might need to fix something. Well, they did listen to them and they fixed something. Cool. Bleed air system, including pressure and temperature simulations, feedback when pneumatically fed systems and starters, right? So this simply, I would say, says, okay, hey, once you start the aircraft, it will inform you about certain things. And if something is wrong, it will tell you, as well as it now includes the pressure and temperature simulations. Hydraulic system also got an update, including the fluid-based pressures sim, with realistic hydraulic accumulator behavior and system knocks-on effects for hydraulic powered systems, as well as full PTCU simulation. Not sure what PTCU stands for. If you know it, drop it in the comment box of this video because I'm really curious. Next thing is the environmental control system with the cabin cockpit, the air mass simulations and sound, right? You can change the air mass. That was previously not simulated, but now it is, as well as the automated brake system with anti-skid, wheel up spin inhibition, and brake temperature simulations, right? So you can overheat the brakes, cool, and now you can also cool them down, right? The electrical system, including the generator bus connection logic and automatic on-ground bus style logic. And the next one is the speed brake and ground spoiler support, spoiler control support. So ground spoiler control system with automated ground spoilers and speed brake auto stall logic and corrected spoiler panel behavior. I'm not sure what this actually is. It looks like that they automated how it works, right? So simply open up the ground spoilers and speed brakes, but not 100% sure about this. It's something I really need to validate because I didn't have time to test it as part of the beta. Next one is the fuel system with automated fuel pump logic and temperature simulations. That's what they added, and the cabin pressurization system fed from the bleed air system with correct climb and decent schedules and control modes. So also some cool things. Almost there for this aircraft, because the next one is the anti-ice system fed from the bleed air with temperature simulation and engine load efficiency decreases. Not sure how I would say what's the benefit for simulation. I think it's to make it more realistic, to be honest. Last or final thing, the pre-flight system auto test simulations, right? They simply test if everything is okay, and also the exterior lighting systems with automatic light logic, improved light levels and locations. So cool. Next two aircrafts, the LS-818 and DG-1001, they correct the instrument names and instrument panels and the boot screens. And as last thing is they fix some bugs, which they normally always do, right? They fixed an issue where the sim would allow an APU or engine bleed air start under the incorrect conditions, right? So that's not what you want because it's less realistic. And they made several enhancements to the G1000 NXI, where they fixed some text, which was not good. They also fixed the plane clearing when loading a VTF as the next leg, and they fixed the wind direction being shown in degrees true rather than magnetic. Last fix is there, the GPS WP distance showing 0 on a random direct to, right? So then show the correct distance. So all kind of cool things, right? If we continue to scroll down, we will probably also find some SDK updates, and that's here, right? So they fix some SDK updates. It's, I would say, a really small list compared to a normal sim update, but there are some fixes. And it's also, there's an important disclaimer here that sim update number 11 onwards, we added some restrictions on allowed files in an assets group of type sim object aircraft. So if you're developing aircrafts, then take this into account. Known issues, there are always known issues. In this case, there are some known issues with the Longitude system, and the control page may not display. But page pane operations is not affected, right? So there are some issues with a specific, in this case the Longitude, where it might not work as expected. So hopefully they'll fix it in the next update. Next one is the touch and go button on the CJ4 throttle handle may be hard or impossible to click for some users. But a click spot has been provided on the fire bottle button to the left of the autopilot button, and the key binding will work to activate touch and go. So if you try to activate touch and go in this aircraft and it doesn't work with you clicking, then try to hit the fire bottle button, and that will activate it. Next one, test display screen on the GNS 430 and 530W will not presently move the CDI needles. In some case you see that the CDI needles are not moving, so known issue, likely be fixed in the future version. And the last one is the nearest intersection space on the GNS units may display procedure intersections which appear to be duplicates. So a lot of fixes and some, I would say, known issues, not too much. I think they did test it for an extended time, right? I think they tested almost for a month or something. Based on what I can remember, they released multiple beta versions of this update, but there's always a chance that something doesn't work. So I would say don't blame Asobo always for it, but make sure that you're always updating the add-ons in your community folder, right? If you're using community editions of aircrafts, then make sure that they are updated. And if you hit issues, then try to say remove them from the community folder and see if it works correctly, because in some cases they I would say are affecting the performance of Flight Simulator. Here ends this video where we looked at the release notes of the Aircraft and Avionics update number 1, which will bump up the version of Flight Simulator to version 1.30.12.0. How to get it? Really easy. Simply, I would say, go first to the store, make sure that Flight Simulator is updated, then start Flight Simulator. It will prompt you to install an update, install that update, give it some time, and get some coffee because it will take some time. And then once it's there, enjoy it. Here ends this video where I hope you liked it. If you liked it, consider to use the like button. If you got questions or comments, then feel free to post them in the comment box below. And if you want to stay up to date about new videos I'm posting, then make sure that you're subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.